Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. Jesse, it's been really warm here. Finally, it's finally happened. I went golfing yesterday. It was a beautiful thing. By the way, there is something we've been over this. I'm an introvert. However, there's something really fun about randomly getting paired up with a bunch. I was with this group of older guys. There were three of them, and I jumped in as I walked on. One guy, he was in the infantry in Vietnam, 80 years old.
Nice.
He had all sorts of stories that he wanted to share. A couple other guys, just super nice. Anyway, there's something about that is really healthy. Getting out and just meeting a bunch of people that I normally wouldn't have done that. And I was just thinking about evangelism and Easter and all the things. So anyway, that was rambling, but that's what's on my brain.
I love it. That's so much fun. It is not warm out here. We had a day that almost got to 60 not too long ago, but then it's been rainy and cold and miserable. So we're like ready for spring. There's daffodils, there's tulips, but it's just not warm. So we're out here in the Northwest doing our soggy spring thing. But anyway, always good to talk shop. It is Easter time. It is right, in the heels of Easter here for all of us. And so we wanted to continue kind of in that lane of, we talked about some evangelism stuff and how do we have some urgency around that and thinking through those things. And today we're going to be talking about something that's related to the urgency of the gospel. It has to do with church planting. And, a lot of times our lane is church revitalization, and we're trying to think of established churches. How do we be healthy? How do we help our churches flourish and to do the kinds of things that can help us move toward the mission God has called us to? And I think what I'm here today in our conversation with our guest, Luke Parker, is that having a sense of urgency about also planting new churches and being a part of that in some way, either supporting or being directly involved in it, is also something that is revitalizing for the local church, for established churches. And so I think that's something of the encouragement that I'm taking away from today. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's a reminder that whatever it is about church planting, and it's really just kind of how are we drilling down and figuring out how people need to be approached with the gospel, or how might they respond to the gospel, is something that translates across whether you're planting a church or not. I know at Tower Hill, we treated our adding another style of worship back 13 years ago. We treated it as a church plant in a sense that we started asking questions like, okay, these people that are attracted or drawn to this style of worship, how do they think about discipleship, kids ministry? In what ways are we communicating to them based on what their needs are? And I think the habit of doing that on a regular basis is one of the most important things that we can do as churches. And so I think there's a lot of overlap here between church planting and revitalization.
Yeah, sort of the creativity and the urgency that's related to that. So our guest today is the Reverend Luke Parker, and I'm going to read this description so that I capture everything that Luke's been up to. But Luke is the church planting director for ECO, and we're so excited to have him on. But this is kind of just a little snapshot of Luke. So he's ECO's church planting director. He served as a church planter in an ECO plant in the Phoenix area. As the student ministries director at a large non-denominational church in Arizona, and several other church plants, and a variety of roles over the years. So he is well-versed in church planting. Before ministry in the local church, he was heavily involved in Young Life, which, again, highly relational kind of urgency of the gospel kind of ministry. Luke attended Fuller Seminary, where he received an MDiv. He also has a BS in biochemistry from the University of Arizona. Bear down, in parentheses, so any Wildcat fans out there. Luke's passion to raise up young leaders and equip them to reach the lost in our time. He lives in Phoenix with his wife, Jessica, and their two boys, Matthew and Samuel. So it's going to be so much fun. We're going to dive into this conversation with Luke and talk church planting and how we as pastors and leaders in the local church and established churches can be a part of that. Well, welcome, Luke Parker, Director of Church Planning with ECO, the denomination I'm connected with. And so excited to have you join us today. We're just going to talk shop, talk church planning. So welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast.
Thanks. It's really good to be here. I'm excited. And I don't know. I'm curious to hear the questions and see where we go. So
we're just kind of follow the conversation where it goes. I think, for a lot of pastors, we're in the trenches doing our stuff in established churches. And sometimes it's good to kind of go up Periscope and check out maybe a part of the conversation that we're not having as often or something like that. So super pumped to have you on. And I've gotten to know Luke, we've gotten to know each other over the years, being on staff with ECO there, and just enjoy your perspective and your passion for the church and for the kingdom. And so glad to have you with us. And maybe to get us into the conversation, just for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role there with ECO.
Sure. So Luke Parker. Let's see. Basically, being on staff with ECO, it's a hard thing to, like, when I try to explain to my non-Christian friends, like, what I do, they're like, there are a lot of churches. Like, what do you do? And I'm like, I kind of help churches to think. It's sort of like in-house consulting. And so if you're a church in ECO and you're trying to figure out how to send a church or start a nonprofit organization or think about a budget or a strategy or how we might help, like, elders and things do stuff, I work with you to resource you. So whatever you might need in terms of next steps or kind of lowering the friction for the process, or is there a good conversation partner? And the same would be true if you're a church planter. Church planters are our heroes. And so it's a hard thing to do, and it's usually pretty lonely. And so as much as possible, we try to make it less lonely and less hard to kind of lower some of the competency barriers that you need to do these things. And so, in one way or another, I'm usually helping either the people being sent or the people doing the sending. It's a lot of fun. And then I work on a great staff with people who are doing all kinds. I don't know. I work with really good people. So, that's
good. I'm glad you got that in there just in case one of them happens to listen. So you got that.
That's right.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool. But so we want to talk a little church planting with you. And, I love that picture. You work with churches that are considering how do we be a part of that. And then also with the folks that are going to go lead the charge and plant churches and those kinds of things. So help us, if depending on where you live in the country, you look around, there's a lot of churches in a lot of places, and then there's some church places where there's not so many. But what's sort of the theological foundation or sort of the motivation for us when it comes to church planting and what we're doing?
Sure. Well, theology is a lot of fun, and I make no claims to be a theologian. Let's see. I suppose the simplest explanation is that every church is a church plant. You currently are both pastors of church plants. They were planted a long time ago. But when it says in Acts, right, like Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, like we're all sitting, the three of us, on the ends of the earth. We're in a place that no one who was talking to Jesus at the time could have imagined. We weren't on the map at the time. We are beyond where there were dragons. And there were faithful people who were so surprised to find out that Jesus' plan for the world was them. And they got on boats and they went by land, and they ended up in foreign places, and they learned languages, and they wrote down scripts, and they tried to find ways to talk about Jesus in Turkey and in Asia, and to very strange looking Anglo people on an island. And those people tried to conquer the world at one time or another, but along the way, they ended up talking about Jesus. And so, there's an awful lot of church plants. I think I'd say that at some level, church planting is this thing that the church has been doing since its inception, and kind of Jesus's thing when he started the church in Jerusalem with a couple of guys and a couple of girls. But ever since then, the church has been starting new churches because it goes to places where there aren't churches, and it creates kind of a community, and that community needs leaders. So that's pretty much Paul's move, right? Like he gets on a boat, he goes to a place, he tells people about Jesus, he raises up new leaders, and then it just kind of happens again and again. So Acts is written, basically, it's a story of how we started new churches. Most of the New Testament is letters to church plants or recently started churches, or written by people who are leaders in local churches that were started 10, 15 years ago. even the Gospels and Revelation, are at some level like, hey, just so you know, guys in Pergamum, this is what's going on. So yeah, I don't know. It's a biblical thing to do and a theological thing to do. We have a sending God, I guess. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's fun to think about that, Jason. I don't know, maybe you can tell us a little, who planted Tower Hill way back. First Pres Tacoma was our sort of commissioning church that said, you know what, there's a community of people out in this little place called Dash Point, and they have a church, but we want to come alongside them and really help them to have leadership and continuity. And so they helped us become a church plant that then became, we celebrated 100 years here not too long ago. But it's good to remember that at some point somebody said we should have a church there. And now we do. So I don't know. How far back does Tower Hill go, to like 1700 or something like that?
Not quite that far. In the late 1800s, it was planted, and then it had moved to its current location in 1952. So I'm really excited to have this conversation, Luke. And here's one of the reasons why. I really do believe, I know they're different animals, but I think every church should be thinking in terms of church planting when it comes to reaching people. I think that there are some crossover concepts between church revitalization and church planting. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, just as a way of getting started, let's say theoretically, we actually are looking into this, but I want to plant a church, and there are a million. It feels like a million different pieces of advice that I've received about how to do that. No, you got to start with small groups. No, you got to start with a big bang. Get critical mass. You got to get your own building. You got to rent a storefront. You got to go into a school. What are some kind of guidelines as a church is looking to plant, or if people are looking to plant a church? What are kind of some foundational steps in that process? Yeah.
Well, it'll be fun. So we'll talk Tower Hill specifically, because that's fun.
That's great.
And then we get out of
this
the broad.
Is great. I'm not even getting charged for this. I mean,
this is it. Yeah, I know. You don't even have to be a part of ECO, guys. We're just giving this one. No, this is kind of, I'd like resourcing folks as they think about it. So I think that church planning can start in a bunch of different ways. It can start with a spreadsheet, like we have money, let's put money in a bank, let's think about, great, that's not a bad place to start. It can start with strategy, like, hey, there's people in this tiny little community across the bay. We should start a thing there. How are they going to get to church in an era when you had to get on a boat or go by horse? Let's find a way to make this a reality. But a lot of the time, I think it's best when it starts with prayer. So I'm just going to ignore some of the basic Christian things, and we'll assume that you're going to operate like Christians. But then beginning to tell the story, right? Like if Tower Hill starts to say like, hey, there are lost people and we are reaching them here. But realistically, if we start a community there, wherever there might be, among immigrants or an apartment complex or in the county over or the town over, we will reach people who we probably wouldn't reach within our church, because it'll be focused in a different way. And it'll be constantly obsessed with finding new people. It won't have to deal with a building. It won't have to deal with, the men's ministry that's been going for 120 years, or these small groups. It doesn't have any of the problems that established churches has. Its primary goal is to reach new people. And so I think as you start telling the story, and as it really leans on like evangelism and reaching lost people, you'll see elders in the church start to go, but isn't the goal to get people to come to church? You go, well, no, the goal is to reach people for the gospel. And one of the best ways we do that is by building community to local church. And they go, so it's not just like get them to listen to Jason. Like Jason is the expert. Jason knows Jesus. Watch Jason follow Jesus. You're like, no, guys, like we all are following Jesus. Mm-hmm. And when we send out other people who follow Jesus, like what happens is a brand new church. So when the lay people start to catch the vision of it, and it's less like a McDonald's franchise, and they start to go like, oh, this is how we reach new folks. Then you start seeing like kind of an odd combination of like, okay, we sense like this call from God. We have these kinds of resources available. So where do the, like kind of what we have and sort of the community's needs and the call from God kind of where's the Venn diagram of that? And then that might look like we rent a storefront, and that might look like we have a youth pastor who's from such and such a town, and he and his wife have had a baby and they're just looking to get back. And so it kind of makes sense. Honestly, we already have a leader. We have people who love that leader. We even have people in that place who would like to kind of be sent by just staying where they are and not having to drive 25 minutes to church. So depending on kind of what you have available and what the community's needs are, that's sort of your next step. But I'd say start with prayer, start by telling the story, and by helping your people begin to think of mission as not just people come here, but well, there's a lot of places where people are lost. So, but ask me questions because I probably was rambling in there.
No, I've got plenty of them. So I think so. Let's say we're on board. Right? You know, our lay people, they're there, they get it, they understand what we're trying to do, and you know, we all limited resources, trying to figure out where's a good place to start. Have you seen any difference in the success of church plants between those that start as like a small group Bible study or those who try to start with a splash? Like they may have a location, a storefront, or a school, and we've got 50 people who have all said they're going to show up. You know, I don't know, like what's the success rate on that? Bearing in mind, those of us who are planting churches, I'm just going to say it, our denomination, we're terrible at planting churches. So we don't exactly have a great track record recently, let's say. I guess we were good once. Have you seen the success rate? Does it seem to be more successful to start? And successful, I just mean like lasts and grows and can become a viable church through the kind of small fellowship Bible study model or the big splash model?
Yeah. Well, yeah, by the way, the Presbyterian movement was once fantastic. And I mean, not any particular Presbyterian tribe, really fantastic at reaching new people. It also had real issues as it reached new people, like some bizarre manifest destiny stuff and colonialism that was wrapped up in there. But the drive to reach people for the gospel was good. The specifics of the PCUSA and how to plant things, I don't know, because it's not a movement I was ever really a part of.
Neither are we.
Yeah. But yeah, when it comes to models, like there's a lot of different approaches, I would say. So maybe the beginning really would be like, what do we mean by success? If we mean this church will be able to pay its bills, govern itself, and at some level is ready to multiply or replicate, then a Bible study might be a very successful model. If the way we're going to frame that Bible study is the pastor's going to be bivocational. So Lifeway did a study recently, or no, the study I guess was going on for a few years, but they dropped it in like December, and basically they're talking about Latino church planners, which is awesome. But in general, kind of cross-denominationally, CRC, Southern Baptists, non-denom, doesn't matter. They'll reach about 30 people for every 100 who do not know Jesus. There will be like 30 baptisms out of 100 people annually. Wow. In the first year, I think it's like even better math. Like it's just a stupid ratio. And the churches often start small. They usually have a pastor who's working like 2 or 3 jobs, just kind of grinding it out. But at some level, so driven by the gospel that like, oh, we'll solve the financial problem later. So the big issue is like, when does the pastor burn out? Like, how do we make that sustainable for like kind of their work-life balance? But that can be really successful, and that's not only a model that works for like Latinos or immigrants. The kind of bivocational business's mission, like how do we get really focused on this? You could talk about like a kind of a small kind of slow growth movement there, but you could also talk about doing like a hybrid model where you're talking about different people meeting in different houses or coffee shops or bars, even church basements all around the city, who think of themselves as one community. But the planter's primary job is to train the leaders. And so each of these things functions like small churches or small groups. They might be 40 people small. They might be 4 people small. They might be, doesn't matter. But they might periodically gather for worship. So that's another kind of approach, less like, hey, we have one thing that meets here and is slowly growing with relational capital and time. And then when you say the big splash, you're probably talking about something like a launch large model, where people are like, hey, in 9 months from right now, we're having church. Y'all should come. And some folks are kind of core team, and some folks are maybe I will help set some stuff up, but I'm not really that deep into this. And some folks are just like, tell me when it happens, but I will come every time you guys have a bounce house. The goal of that model is like we burn a lot of money really, really fast. So for like 9 months, you might spend in Jersey, I don't know, probably like $1 million, $1.5 million. We're getting people to come to this. The church launches with 300 people. The next week, the church is probably 150 people. Because that's like literally a 50% reduction. But now you have a small church with all the momentum of a church plant. And so its goal is to grow to like 400 people kind of over the next like 1.5 to 2 years. The challenge of that thing is it tends to be lighter on evangelism and people coming to know Jesus. More like, hey, let's find Christians in the area. And the other problem with it is it's kind of like a giant baby. So it has like organizationally no maturity, but it has a lot of people. And so you're like, that it really needs a lot of kind of
Sounds
structures.
horrible.
Yeah, right. It's you're like, oh man, it wouldn't be good to have like a
Just talked
300
me out of the
lift.
launch large model. I think
Yeah, but there's great stuff about it, honestly. So it
No,
can become financial. So it's that thing people sometimes think of as like, well, that's really, you're like, well, that one is expensive, but can be, it's sort of high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
In post-Christian environments, it doesn't always work well. In suburbs that are growing, it works really, really well. The kind of like dense urban area, like the kind of hybrid model, meeting in homes or apartments or things, can be really cost effective and pretty low risk financially. You know, we have a staff person, we're making it half their job for a while, and we'll see if this gets any traction. So yeah, depending on how that works. Then ecclesially, like, how does that work? Like in our denomination, I don't know. If your denomination won't allow for different models, or if the board that you're probably going to be saying goodbye to this thing at some point, like it'll be its own thing or have its own life and kind of 501c3. But I mean, probably if you do any one of those models, you'll see people come to know Jesus. People in your church will be so excited about what happened that they'll want to see another one happen. It has a galvanizing effect. So when you're talking about like some of the revitalization, it's not just like, oh, look at that cool thing that happened over there. As we tell those stories, we think of those as our stories. So like, look at all the people our church is reaching for Jesus, even though it's really like those people. You're like, well, we sent them though. So we get credit for everything that happens over there. There's some great stuff that happens. Anyway.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jason, any follow-ups for Tower Hill as you guys are laying the tracks for some church planting things you guys
Are you kidding me? I mean, I don't want to dominate the entire conversation.
No, it's good. This is what it's for. We're learning a lot just by listening in.
All right.
Help, man. Let me know. Call me up.
No. So, I mean, what are as you see, I don't know how much actual church planting is happening at Eco. Could be a lot, could be a little, I'm not really sure. But what are some pitfalls that you see that really become obstacles early on when it comes to planting?
Oh man. Okay. So pitfall, there are a lot of them, and people will write books, or I think there's like a whole podcast about one particular church plant that had pitfalls early on. Yeah, let's see. From a planter standpoint, if you're talking about a person who kind of likes Jesus but doesn't love Jesus, you're gonna run into issues. Even if they're incredibly entrepreneurial, they'll build something, but it might not be a church, and if it is, it might not be a Christian church. Cult leaders are great, right? They're so good at building stuff, and they got a following. And in a world of social media, right? So maybe like really, there's like, objective things that look more like wiring and assessments. So assessments are a good idea. Don't just pick somebody you believe in. I guess that would be one of the things. Send them through something that asks a lot of like good questions and things like that, but also know them, like relationally, get a sense of like their character and their actual discipleship. Cause it's a hard thing, plant a church. And if you're going to give somebody money or a salary, if you're going to invest in a person, having a good idea of where that investment's going, like what that really looks like, because they've got a lot of free time. And if they're not driven to succeed, if they're not really talking about evangelism, if they're just getting paid to go get coffee with strangers, you can feel like, what are we actually investing? It's supposed to like, no, I know these people and it's not going well, but it's not because they're not working hard. It's just, it's hard to plant a church. Getting clarity on strategy kind of on the front end. Like, what do we mean? What do we mean by success? Is success people coming to know Jesus and getting baptized? Cool. Is success 300 people in an auditorium? Cool. Is success more leaders than there are attenders? So depending on like what we're measuring, like where we're really seeing kind of those, what's our dashboard for this? And making sure everybody who's investing in it is really clear on what that means. Because if some folks are like, no, we're starting Tower Hill again, you're like, if that's really what we're trying to do, well then great. But if that's not what we're trying to do, then they, even as it succeeds, they'll think of it as a failure. And so that can create some real friction for the planter or for the leaders or for this sense of like, what are we investing in and why? So yeah, and then I think usually having a clear runway. There's a weird, this is kind of true, I think, of all Presbyterians, but non-denom wise, it makes no sense. It's a weird thing. There's like this, like, oh, we give $500,000, $300,000, $150,000, and we're out. And I have no idea where that math came from or like why it's 3 years or why it steps down that way. But walking into a like any kind of church planning situation with like a one size fits all resourcing model is bad. No bank would fund every entrepreneurial endeavor the same way. Like food trucks, yeah, there's probably like best practices, but a tech startup is a fundamentally different thing and you need this equipment. You're like, they do not need a van and a stove. Like, why would you? But like, oh, all church plants need blank is crazy. So if you're doing like hey, we're going to invest in a staff person or a key like lay leader and encourage them with this thing that started at their house where like everybody's dog and people happy hour is growing. And there's 40 people now and there's 50 people now. And, sometimes they do Bible studies and alpha and it's kind of growing a little bit. Like, that's cool. That thing doesn't need $500,000.
Yeah.
Don't give it but maybe they start to need like paid childcare help. And as they need paid childcare help because they have so many families, you start going like, how do we build children's ministry that feels like childcare, but is like it's play, but it's children's ministry. Not that we're tricking people, that we're also just sort of creating a really gentle environment for kidsmen. And that might be their biggest hurdle, not paid like senior pastor staff, but like, hey, we need like a really robust childcare / children's ministry thing. That as it grows has really good safety practices. So millennial parents and Zoomer parents feel safe here. And then as it grows, you're like, oh, so year 1, it might have cost $30,000. Year 3, they might have a huge financial hurdle. So even though we have built it like a good war chest, year 2, we need to pour gas on this fire because we can see the fire is growing. And then in year 3, we do want to wean them off this because they can't just need our funds forever. So you might want to increase investment in some plants. That's not necessarily a bad sign. Like things are growing, so they have a financial problem. So maybe avoid one size fits all models, get really clear on what success actually looks like and know who it is you're investing in. Those would probably be 3 key things.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And I know, part of your work is really drilling down with people who are interested in church planning and doing that assessment work and kind of just making sure that they know what they're getting into as well. Because imagine having a passion to want to reach people with the gospel is good. But do you have the wiring? Do you have the kind of the entrepreneurial spirit and kind of the kind of that grit that you need? I mean, you talk about every time I hear you talk, you remind us how hard it is and how the support they're going to need, but also it might not be for everybody. And I kind of look at myself and I'm going, man, I don't know how long I could hack it out there in that context, but I can get behind and support and encourage people that are doing that. And I guess maybe that would be a question, Jason. We can keep doing the Tower Hill questions too, as you're thinking of them. But, Tower Hill, you guys are thinking in terms of what is God calling us to multiply, to go beyond ourselves? But maybe, Luke, for some churches that are not there yet, what are some of the things that we maybe need to be thinking about or that would encourage us to move beyond sort of a supporting mentality to really ascending or multiplying mentality? Are there some things that happen in existing churches that tend to be catalysts for that? Or, do we need a little kick in the pants to kind of get thinking in those terms?
Yeah, man. Okay, there's like 4 questions wrapped in that question. So I'll ramble and then you redirect me.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I'd say like, maybe the first thing, just all the time when you're talking to your people, right? Like leaning in hard on our church is not the only church, right? And if we think of like the Seattle metro area, which I'm not necessarily saying Marine View fits in, but like, people in Seattle think of Tacoma as Seattle now, which I find adorable. But like, this is this whole big thing. We're not the only church here. We're not going to reach all these people. And at some level, if we start to think of the local church like a fishing net, like some people are catching, like we're getting, but there's like a hole and there are probably a bunch of holes and fish are sailing right through those. And we are not designed to meet that particular hole. And so the more we start looking at our city or our county or the town over, and we start saying, yeah, there probably is a really good Methodist church there. And there probably is a really good non-dom church there. And there probably is kind of a weird sort of Pentecostal thing that feels pretty orthodox sometimes. And, every now and again, they bring in the wrong prophet and they go, oh, that wasn't great. But like, the Spirit's moving. So like there are some folks like kind of scattered around who make up a mosaic in the city. But at some level, there are people who are not being reached well by the local church and helping them to see like we're not the only thing there is. Like we want people to come. We want our church to grow and be healthy. Phoenix, for example, has millions of people. And there's a church in town that I think has like 50,000, give or take, spread across multiple campuses around the city. Their goal, I think, at least at one point, was to grow by 10% a year, which is cool. But if that church grows to 150,000 people, which would be crazy, unwieldy, and also like really good leadership and organizationally, it wouldn't be a tenth of Phoenix that's being reached for the gospel.
Yeah.
That's so many people, so many marriages, so many children. So more healthy churches are just like more encounters for neighbors and folks who don't know Jesus. So helping people kind of see that. The thing that kind of catalyzes most churches, in my experience, is there's usually a well-placed leader, whether it's a senior pastor or an associate pastor, executive pastor, or like the head of the finance team is one of the elders, but there's the mission person who just like is very invested in this, who won't let it go, who will talk to the board and go, guys, or the woman who's like really in charge of missions just keeps talking about like we want to plant churches across the street and around the world, like just won't let it go. And the more they talk about it, the more we pray, and the more we pray, the more we begin to have vision, and the more we begin to have vision, the more we start to say, all right, how would we actually have goals? Like, what does that really look like? We say we want to do this. Do we want to be people who like hire a person and then send a person and are investing like crazy amounts of money, not just as a community, but like with people in our community supporting this? Cool. That's expensive, but that can work. Hey, do we want to team up with 2 or 3 churches in our area and figure out like what each one can do well? Like, can we do a community approach to this?
Mm-hmm.
That could be a great way to go. Hey, do we know who we are and who we're not? And we don't want to do either of the first 2 things. We just want to catalyze specific parts of a church plant or a church planting movement. So we're going to find things where we go, we are uniquely positioned to support children's ministry. We're uniquely sufficient to support the worship side of this. Or we have a lot of kind of professionals who built nonprofits in our church.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to create an incubator. We're just going to do leadership development. We're going to send out leaders, and they might get funding, but like we don't fund churches, we train leaders. Well, that's so depending on like what you can do. But I think maybe just the simplest place, like if you're looking for like a simple entry point, it's honestly very like anybody listening, there's a church planter in your city or your town or not far from you within 15 miles. I'm almost positive. And they probably are very different from you theologically, and they've probably got a weird background, and they may have no theological training. Buy them coffee or a burrito or whatever is, barbecue, wherever you are in the country. Sit with them, hear their story, hear about their passion, and let it kind of just hit you. They will have an urgency for lost people where you've done ministry for 15 years. And again, if you're a layperson, they'll have an urgency for it'll surprise you. You'll go, there are not that many, like you'll almost be disagreeing with them with like, there are not that many lost people like right there. Like I know that. And you're like, start walking around and you'll start to see them in new ways. As you invest in this person, just like buy them coffee, see if they ever need like childcare for just their personal family. Like, hey, you guys are running a bunch of Bible studies. Can we just watch your kids sometime? Can we have you over for dinner? If you ever needed like pulpit help, like if you guys just need like a week's vacation, you might think that we're crazy because we baptize babies or because we like women in ministry, whatever. Like I don't have to talk about that stuff. I could just talk about whatever you want me to talk about. But find a way to just gently support a church planter that probably you have the time or capacity as a volunteer or as a ministry person, and you'll start to catch a sense of like why they're so passionate, and that might start to leak into your church.
That's really good.
I think that's great advice. I feel like the biggest enemy to my own passion as a leader is routine, and how inwardly focused you can quickly become. Just focus on getting one routine to the next. Rather than thinking about all the things, I'm thinking about, well, how do I just get to the next thing? And then I got that next thing and next thing. And you need those regular pattern interrupts to remind you of what's at stake and who's out there and how they need to hear the gospel and how they're not hearing it. And how can we, with who we are and what we can do, be a part of what God is doing outside the walls of the church. And that only comes when I can just get out of my own way of the routine of an established ministry. And I feel like that's spot on.
That's good, man. Yeah, routine can be a weird thing, right? Like you're like, all right, we got through Lent and Easter and it's summertime. We do fall lunch and you're like, it's been 5 years. Like when did we step back a little bit and go like, what's the vision for Tower Hill? Like what's not saying that you're not doing that, but like that's the routine thing is like, you just kind of keep your head down and you forget to kind of work on the thing because you're so busy working in the thing.
We often talk about how we're in the trenches of ministry. I mean, it really is that. And so you're going and you're grinding it out and you're doing all the things and and you maybe forget some of these pieces, in our eco landscape. I think we send churches as the last step of our flourishing measures or whatever. And I'm like, man, I'm still working my way through the first 3 or something, right? The idea of getting to like place where we're really multiplying leaders and then sending and planting. And but I like your encouragement. Maybe that's the challenge for everybody listening, is to go and identify a church plant or a church planter somewhere in your community. Like you said, you throw a dart, there's probably someone within 15 miles, right? And just get to hear their story. I'm feeling convicted about doing that myself. Let's go and figure out who's trying to do something for the kingdom here and how we can encourage them in some way. And maybe that's what stirs some things up in us, or gives us an imagination for what that could look like in our own churches, especially for established churches. We got so much to do, Luke.
Yeah.
How do we have time to think bigger beyond our own walls,
No, I think that's true, man. And I think that's, kind of to what Jason was saying, right? Like we have so much to do. But yeah, there's something about, if you hang out with a planter, right? Like you'll get a sense of kind of there's a maniacal thing that goes on there. Partly because they'll be in it and they'll feel like they're drowning, and you'll be like, oh man, it feels fragile all the time. It's a funny thing about it. And so you'll see it, and there'll be an appreciation for like, oh, I'm so glad we have systems and we have leaders. But then there will be a challenging and an encouraging thing somewhere in there, and you'll get a sense of kind of the character and the personality of the kinds of people that you're sort of looking for, at least what they feel like when they're early stage or 2 years in or whatever that might look like. But again, theology, you might go like, dude, this is pretty wild. Like we're not on the same page there, but I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I think even we have so much to do, and like, when do we get there? It's kind of like with tithing or with evangelism, right? Like there are people in local churches who you're pastoring, both of you, and you're like, yeah, guys, tithing is just a part of what it means to follow Jesus. And they go like, oh, 10% of my money, like right now? And you're like, you're right, that would be a big hurdle. And like, maybe you don't have a budget, maybe you're in a bunch of debt. What if we started with like 1%? And you just started like finding out how much money you spend on DoorDash. And they're like, oh, it's a lot of money. You're like, yeah, that's kind of the idea of DoorDash. You don't realize how much money you spend. And so they figure out where their money's going, and they start kind of doing healthier financial discipleship. You go, evangelism. They go, that sounds awkward or embarrassing, or I think I'm going to fail. And you're like, cool. But what if you try failing this week? Like, just have one good failure. And then we talk about why you failed, or like, what the deal is, and you start praying for the person you talk to. And so they don't go like, well, someday when I'm enough of a Christian, or someday when I've got it all together. I think sometimes for established churches, you're like, well, whenever we've got 5 campuses, 2,000 people, a budget of $10.5 million and extra money, you're like, there is no church with extra money. But that never, because if you're good at ministry, you always have too much mission, right? You always have too many needs. You're too invested in your city. So really big churches even struggle with this. It's just, how do we start taking small kind of steps so we can imagine the next one? I don't know.
Have you guys seen in planting the same thing that we are seeing across denominations, especially in the main line? There aren't enough young people wanting to go to school and become pastors. They want to go do something else. Are you seeing a decline in the number of pastors or leaders who want to plant churches, or no, or an increase? I mean, I don't know, but are you seeing the same trend as to younger generations not wanting to even go into congregational ministry, but rather something else?
It's tricky. Because the truth is, like, we've got a planter who's like 71, and he's great. So I don't necessarily need young all the time. But I think the kind of the absence of young leaders is an interesting thing that like is visible in a way. I don't know how much it's affecting planting so much as just kind of the general landscape. But yeah, it's like COVID hit worship ministry and youth ministry really hard. And so you lost like this like generation of people. It hit the pastors really hard. So people stopped investing in younger people because you're like, oh, but you just get more blinders on, like, how do I kind of knuckle down? And so I remember talking to a guy, it was like 2 weeks ago. He's like a staffing, like he's like a headhunter for employees. And he's like, yeah, no, we're always looking for people like this. But I remember being in a room, he's like, and it was a room full of like large church pastors. And one of them just stood up and was like, I have to confess, it's been 15 years since I've told somebody they should go into ministry.
Wow.
And he's like, because I think there was, again, we all went through a thing, and it was like ministry is really hard, and so you stop kind of pouring into and forming the next generation. There aren't 16-year-olds in a youth ministry who are hearing like, ministry is great, go into ministry. What they're hearing is, it's going to be the most unchurched generation in the history of America, or it's really hard right now, or
Yeah.
And so it becomes less aspiration, and then you add in the kind of the acid of deconstruction and some of the weird things of like the divided time. So I think there's maybe there's less investment kind of from like an older generation into a younger generation for any number of reasons. And then when you combine that with some of the like people got sucked out of the system, who might have gone to the next thing, seminary or associate pastor, whatever the deal is. But then there's this other weird deal where like, I feel like people don't have the same sense of like kind of missional drive in the United States as they once did. And I don't know where, like, there's still plenty of that with like, oh, I should go overseas. But a lot less like, ooh, the church in America. And I think some of us, and I'm not saying it's like a denominational, I think it's just sort of across the landscape. There are a lot of folks who are like, yeah, it's weird in the US. Like, I don't know, we'd like, the idea that there are lost people along, like in another community is less motivating than it once was. And so, yeah, the idea that we'd send or spool people up and then kind of, the Hot Wheels car thing, like how do we launch them? I think there's a lot less kind of energy there for that. More like, ooh, what we really need is the youth pastor that we're having trouble finding. Don't do that. Do this. Oh, we really need like a good worship guy. Don't go start a church. Please stay with us. Like we kind of a scarcity mentality that meets like a lack of missional imagination. So I don't know. Those are my quick thoughts on it. There's probably like real data out there, but I don't know where.
And if Luke says it must be true, is what.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just with enough confidence.
That's awesome, man. Jason, what other thoughts or questions are tumbling around in your head?
I mean, a lot, but I think some of it's been answered in the sense of what I feel from this conversation is more of an impulse to let it start organically as a model of, you could always ramp up something that is small and you can increase investment, or you can add a staff person, or anything. You could be sort of nimble and scrappy, I think might be a better strategy than let's burn a bunch of money and try to get people to go to a location. We're considering all sorts of things, so I'm not sure where we're going to land. It's possible that we could partner with a congregation that is going to close. It's possible that we may kind of do something that's more like a not its own church, but another campus of the church. I mean, these are all things up for consideration. But the only thing I really care about, honestly, and you touched on this, Luke, I want people to come to know Jesus. And when people ask me, who are you trying to reach? I say, I want everybody. And I'm not kidding. I want to do whatever it takes to get everybody to know Jesus. And so I think if that's the goal, that will be the kind of North Star, the true north in our decision making. If it's about bringing people to Jesus, then let us make decisions accordingly, prayerfully and accordingly about what works for us as an organization. And I just think healthy churches need to plant healthy churches. So we just haven't seen a whole lot of that. But I've never seen it modeled from the ground up. So obviously I just, asking as many questions as I can as we figure it out.
Yeah, man. By the way, no joke, I really will help. Let me know. Yeah, the whole idea, I think, maybe behind ECO's kind of resourcing model is like it's designed like movement wise. So we're weaker at the center and stronger in the local church. But like, because the bureaucracy is not useful, right? We want to be more like a church planting network or some of those things, where we can kind of like really empower our churches to do what they need to do, because they know better what Jersey looks like than I do. So figuring out like, how do we provide resources, or like a menu of resources that are useful, and then just go like, hey, if you guys think that this is a good idea, like if you want to start a coffee shop, lawn bowling league, whatever, we love that idea. What do you need from us? Like, where's what questions do you have, or like what kind of conversation partners? When I look at like, I've spent time with people in pretty challenging environments, right? Like the Arabian Peninsula, who are trying to reach people for Jesus, and like they got to be quiet. They can do it. They just like they're like, we got to be quiet. You're like, okay, yeah, no social media presence. Like we don't broadcast that we're doing this. The government's okay with it so long as we're not obnoxious. And obnoxious might be like just acknowledging that we want people to know Jesus. Like, so it's the bar for obnoxious is different. But those folks are like, yeah, we've figured out the right version of like how to have the conversation with people. And so we're just trying to increase the number of those conversations. And then if there's a community, like we don't buy a building because that's a bad idea. The building is dangerous. We don't put a cross on the building. That would be very bad. Or the Chinese church where they go like, yeah, there's kind of this gray area between like the official church and like that, which is really illegal. And like, we just know to stay inside the gray area. And like, they see this movement that explodes because they're so focused on like, how do we lead people to Jesus and then empower those people to be leaders, not like come and sit and consume like, again, some great expert who's theologically trained, but like, how do we give you enough theological training and then just get you out the door? Because you guys should be doing this. Yeah. I don't know. We have more resources and more freedom than anywhere else in the world. We lack some of the urgency and the creativity. But if we can imbibe some of that, I mean, we're well set up by Jesus to do the work that we've been given to do. So,
Dr. John Cotter from Harvard University, he talks about, these expert on leading change. He says that people think that the first step is vision, but the first step is developing a sense of urgency, because otherwise nothing else happens. Urgency around the problem. And we saw this in COVID, right? So all of a sudden, churches that never did anything new for decades figured out how to stream online fast, and because of the urgency. So anyway,
don't waste a crisis, right? Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Good.
Well, Luke, this is like tip of the iceberg, and that's probably an understatement. There's so much there. And if people want to follow up with you or connect with you and talk church planting, or maybe someone's listening in and they're like, you know what, church planting might be in my future as a call. How can people connect with you?
Well, it's pretty easy. So we've got a website, which is called eco-pres.org. I'm easy to get a hold of because it's church planting at eco-pres. We could probably throw that in a description of the video or something so people can just click on it. Just shoot us a note. Poke around our website. We've got stuff like, hey, here's some of the ways we try to resource planters. I don't have a secret pile of money. We are somewhere between like network and denomination, right? Like if there are things you really need in a denomination, we aren't some of those things. If there's things you really like about networks, we've got more structure than some of them. But for folks who fit us theologically and are looking for like freedom, some resourcing that people will get out of your way, we're probably about right. So poke around the website, shoot me an email. We'd love to talk more about kind of what God's laying on your heart and that urgency that Jason was talking about. Be good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's see, anything that we missed, or I don't know, sometimes we just say, hey, the floor is yours. Any words of encouragement or challenge for pastors and church leaders listening in?
Yeah. Well, I think it would be a mistake to listen to this and not take a next step. So if the next step is simple, like I'm just going to find out if there's a planter nearby, I don't believe Luke. I'm pretty confident. It's just statistically speaking, there are a fair number of people out there. Find them, find out that they exist, and try to bless them in some way. And just learn a little bit more about their story and why they feel called to your place. That's an easy next step. If you're someone who's wondering, like, is this a thing God's calling me to do? Pray. And not like for 2 minutes at the end of like go spend like an hour somewhere with a Bible, or talk to your husband or your wife or whatever, and just go like, hey, like, I don't know what the Lord's up to, but like, it might be something. And if you're in a local church like Tower Hill or whatever, and you're going like, hey, we got the begin, like we can see that we have resources. We're just trying to figure out like what to do with those resources. There are more people like me who are happy to resource you as you try to figure out like where to employ those, where to kind of like if it was like a crowbar, like where do we put it to kind of get the most leverage? The only other thing I'll say is not all church plants succeed. So you will definitely find that like you dive in on something, you go, oh, I feel like an angel investor, like it doesn't always work out, but when it hits pretty big, and you'll be so glad to see what God did. So you were talking about how church planting is hard. It is. It's hard for senders. It's hard for the sent. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's so worth it. like all hard things that are worth doing. It's the payoff is exciting. You'll see God move in incredible ways. So I'd say take a next step and see, get a sense of whether God really is in this. So.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know Holy Week and real time, we're all kind of chasing down all the things, but really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and really, truly reach out to Luke. Luke is an amazing guy, and I'm sure would be willing to have conversations. And Jason and I are always available and willing to. Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. And we love talking church. We love talking church planting with Luke today, and we hope this is an encouragement to everybody listening in.
Yeah, thanks so much, Luke. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. It's fun to be here.
Jason, so much fun to have Luke with us. And really, we kind of went in a direction with the conversation. We had a whole list of questions and ended up just talking shop really with Luke about Tower Hill and about some of his things that he's seen and would encourage us around church planting. And so just fun to have Luke on. Love talking church with people who care about the local church and want to see people hear the good news about Jesus and have their lives changed by that. So grateful for Luke and his good work. And I think, thinking about takeaways, the one thing that really stood out to me and I'm committed to doing is just taking him up on that challenge to go and identify a church planter and meet with them or do something to bless them. So maybe that's what your first step out of the gate could be, is just go find someone that's doing this and encourage them in some way or get to know their story.
I think it's a great idea. We actually had that happen to us recently. Somebody reached out to us. He's actually an associate pastor of another church, just looking for more preaching opportunities. And I had a chance to meet with him. And he has a church planter's heart, and we're thinking about church planting. So it was just really interesting how God sort of brought that to us. But I think, honestly, as we were talking about kind of when routine becomes a rut, and I think the way to break that is to be re-energized with passion for the gospel, or passion for the lost. And I feel like, meeting with a church planter, that's the exact thing you're going to get.
That's right.
It was interesting what he said when he was talking about how the church planter is probably going to be, I don't know, he didn't say it like this, but like a little wacky, right? Like a little just different, like maybe you want to agree with everything theologically. So I think that gives us permission to just think, okay, we don't have to have 1,000% agreement on all theological issues. I just want to see a kindred spirit or in a heart to, share the gospel with others and to be inspired by that and to be affected by that. I think
catch a little of the enthusiasm and the passion. Yeah. And then, I hearing that heart too, that it really is a challenge that they're facing. And if there's a way to encourage them in some way, or just to say, hey, we want to be a little bit of wind in your sails as you're doing this, I think is good stuff. But as you're thinking about Tower Hill, is there anything that jumped out at you as you guys are kind of processing what this might look like for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, our listeners kind of heard me verbally processing it as we were talking, and just that, we had talked about, do we want like a large scale sort of launch situation? And we don't, we've been talking about this for a couple of years. There's plenty of want to, which is great. It's just a matter of finding what's the right strategy for us. And I think what I'm feeling is, let's move on to what's next. Let's not worry about the strategy just yet. Let's see what we can just get started. Let's start small. Let's figure out, is there some sort of ministry presence we can have somewhere that makes sense and that we could build from. So I think that's enough for us to just get something going and stop worrying about the perfect plan.
Yeah, I think that's really spot on. And it's almost like you're building the fire a little bit at a time rather than building the whole thing and then putting getting the torch in there and really getting the whole fire going. It's like there's a little ember in there and you blow on it and you put a little bit more kindling, you resource it a little more and let it kind of develop into something substantial. And in some ways that kind of takes the pressure off, I think, a little bit. Let's start with what is there, or what, some small thing, and see how we can resource it and see what God might do with it. So lots of good things to think about in there, and good of you, Luke, to come on. If you're listening back to the episode, thanks again for doing that. And do reach out to Luke. He's a great guy. He loves to talk shop and to provide resources and just be, as he said, a conversation partner for churches, pastors, leaders, and those who are maybe considering planting. He'd be a great one to have a conversation with. So thanks again, everybody, for listening in. And Jason, I'm always grateful for these conversations we get to have together.
Me too. Me too. I feel like we're extra blessed because we get this shot in the arm once a week when we're talking about this stuff.
Yep.
So thanks everyone for listening. Again, I want to just welcome all of our new listeners and folks that have joined us or just discovering us. So thank you. Share it with your colleagues if you find this stuff helpful. That's the only thing we're trying to be. We just want to be helpful to everybody. We've got 439 episodes of free listening, and if you're ever having a hard time sleeping, you just put these on, you'll be right out. So anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. And as we say every time, because it's true, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care.